Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in TradFi, digital assets, technology, and financial planning. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me at the Nasdaq market site this afternoon, we have S.Y. Kim, CEO of Toss Securities, Eric Noonan, CEO of CyberSheath, Aileen Allkins, President and CEO of TeKnowledge, and Umayal Swarnam, Senior Product Security Engineer at a multinational healthcare company. They join us to discuss companies across the board and how they can approach cyber and risk management while adopting digital transformation. It is great to have everyone with us. Welcome to Trade Talks, and of course, welcome to Market Site. Let's quickly go around the horn here. Kim, S.Y., we'll start with you. Tell us about Toss Securities.
So Toss Securities is a 3-year-old company. We launched 3 years ago. We are the only mobile fintech brokerage company in Korea. We are like a Robinhood in US. While we are mobile, we invest a lot in cybersecurity. We had to take a very different approach. And also, we are one of the top spenders in cybersecurity space in Korea. And also, what we've done was, in addition to regulations, we built our own systems for cybersecurity.
All right, and Eric, CyberSheath, besides being a tongue twister for me.
I've heard that before. So we're a managed compliance services provider. So what that means is we take all the day-to-day IT pieces of the puzzle, the managed security piece of the puzzle, the 24/7 monitoring, et cetera, and we bring it together from a regulatory perspective so that companies can kind of measure once with all the operational pieces of cybersecurity and comply many across all the regulatory requirements.
Right, and technology, and from Cyprus.
Yes, thank you. We're a global company, and we help businesses accelerate their digital transformation agendas, and we do that through our cybersecurity services, generally advising, implementing managed services, and then also through our role-based digital upskilling and reskilling focused on AI, cloud, and cybersecurity.
And Umayal, tell us about your role as a security engineer at a major healthcare company.
Yeah, so I've been a security professional, but also a security researcher, and I've worked at a variety of sectors, including healthcare, telecommunications, and media. And some of my research focus has been looking at evolving technologies like blockchain and AI, and some of the ones that we've mentioned, and how they apply to Internet of Things, digital products and services that are getting more and more connected nowadays. I have several patents pending specifically in the space of permissioned blockchain and authentication and things like that. So I'm excited to join the folks today.
Let's kick it off and talk about the cyber threat landscape and how it's evolving. S.Y., particularly in financial services, it is vulnerable. That's some of the most important data that a client carries with them.
So we take cybersecurity very seriously. We hold customer access. So our trust is the most important thing. So our utmost priority when we built out our platform was focusing on cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, and when you think about it, Eric, the infrastructure and the tech stacks that companies are building out just leads to more vulnerabilities because there's more layers. And certainly, I'm sure you've seen that as cyber continues to evolve.
Absolutely. So it's just an ever-expanding footprint and attack surface. And so as technology advances, that just means the attack surface advances. And certainly, we see every day nation states or other attackers taking advantage of that. And then when you add the regulatory component on top of that, I think one of the things that's often overlooked today is that the entire U.S. economy is really starting to be regulated, relative to cybersecurity, and so that's just another complexity that you have to deal with.
Right, and Aileen, you make an interesting point in your notes here that it underpins all aspects of the digital transformation. It's not simply just a cost for an organization, but it also ensures growth and continuity across operations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've all seen the research that talks about 85% of companies globally had at least one successful cyber attack in the last 12 months, 95% of financial services companies globally. And yet with the acceleration of digital transformation, cybersecurity absolutely has to underpin everything that you do. And I think that evolves as well the role of the CISO, because once upon a time, cyber and the CISO would have been the no organization, right? You can't do that, we have to protect. Now the CISO has to play a role of enabling an organization. They have to be a true business partner because businesses can't evolve, they can't compete, they can't stay relevant unless they can accelerate their digital transformation, which of course naturally increases cyber risk.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does. And Umayal, from your perspective, of course, being in healthcare, it's like we have financial services over here, and healthcare is the bookend here. Again, highly vulnerable data.
Yeah, and I think like we're in the midst of digital transformation in healthcare, in financial services, and in automotive and any kind of sector that's looking at connecting. And today, whether you take the subway, it's connected. Whether you're stopping at a stoplight, that's connected. Like everything is getting connected. And like you mentioned, Eric, the attack surface is exponentially greater. Before we looked at point A to point B, how do you secure what's in between? Now you're looking at A, B, C to X, Y, Z. So when enterprises look, no matter what sector they're in, whether they're small, large, anything in between, whatever industry they fit in, they're at these crossroads where how can you lean into digital transformation, but also take a risk management approach. And I know we touched on regulations a little bit, but I think one big thing to look out for enterprises would be IEC 62443, which is going to be a big approach for enterprises to actually take a risk-based approach and see what fits. So healthcare might have different type of assets and financial services might have different sets of assets. So how did they put it into different security levels and have the relevant security controls is going to be, I think, really huge going forward across the industries.
It's a great point that you bring up about regulation, whether it's specific to an industry like financial services or healthcare, or if we're even looking at regional regulatory environment. I mean, the EU in many cases, Aileen, has framework around these things, whereas we're still, whether it's AI, digital assets or so forth, we're still working on
GDPR data, yeah.
Right, so in a way that framework exists, but we're still trying to piece that out here in the US.
Yeah, and I think global companies as well are going to have to navigate the regulations across countries. So it's hard enough when you just have to deal with it in one. And again, if you think about what that means to the skills that you have to have in your company, it's no longer just about the technicalities, but it is the regulation, the compliance, the laws around that. And as a supplier, we are asked very often through the whole sort of client or vendor onboarding KYC process, what you have to comply with now as a supplier to businesses is getting tougher. So this isn't just about keeping your business safe, it is about actually being able to do business and win business with clients.
And I think one of the things that, just to piggyback on that I think is a bright spot actually around the regulatory compliance piece is that I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the compliance was kind of checkbox-based paperwork compliance. I think there's a great convergence now, and most of the compliance regulations that are emerging are actually good cyber hygiene. So there's great alignment. You're actually, I think, getting better security and compliance. And I think rather than having kind of two disparate kind of sectors, competing with resources, there's a great convergence. I think we're getting better cybersecurity and compliance.
And in banking, I think, where countries are beginning to mandate sharing of information on cyber attacks so that, you can start sharing the information and proactively learning, because if one bank, for example, has been attacked, quite sure the next one will follow once they've discovered vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Let's talk about SY for a moment here, how you see the role of the Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO. Again, you're in a vulnerable industry with financial services, and that's high-level data to protect.
So relatively in financial services, there is a very clear guidance to what you should do from Korea. And they also measure how much you spend over time as well, your investment. But at the same time, we had to develop our own sort of systems in order to monitor our gray areas of the system. So that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Erica, I think what I find interesting in terms of our coverage is seeing how cybersecurity and the board are coming together more. I mean, you're seeing more cybersecurity experts on the board. The role of the CISO, to Aileen's point, is evolving, and how they're partnering and not operating in silos as much. You need to have like a bird's eye look at what's happening across all of your enterprise verticals, because attacks aren't specific to one silo.
No, that's completely true, and I think Aileen nailed it. You need to be a business partner as a CISO today, and I think what that means is you have to be able to explain it to the board in a way that relates back to the business. So find the regulatory framework that's relevant, marry that up with the actual day-to-day operational piece of cybersecurity, and then talk to the board with metrics and numbers and measurements that actually relate back to the business. I think if you can do that, you can be a successful CISO.
It's also planning for the future. CISOs now need to know what products do you plan to take to market, which geographies do you plan to take those products to market, because all of that, again, requires proactive thinking and planning, as opposed to once we're ready, now we'll think about it. I think it changes the role as well, by the way, of the CIO, the CTO, because I think an entire IT organization needs to be a cyber organization as well. You have to sort of embed cyber and security into all of IT, not just as its own standalone thing. So I think it changes a lot of roles at a C-level.
So the Chief Technology Officer and the CISO, they're two very different things, right? Like, one is focused on security and risk management. I think when initially, when you think of the CTO just as this umbrella over everything that touches the tech stack, right? But it's two very different roles now. I mean, you've seen in the past where sometimes they would have been like information technology
who reports to who,
would be like one role, but it sounds as if it's more complex than that.
Yeah, I think that they are different roles, but there's such an overlap because you can't separate security from the technology strategy.
Right.
It has to be an integral part of it.
Umayal, do we have enough to train people? Do we have the skill set to be able to manage these types of priorities? I mean, you have so many different competing business priorities. Everyone wants to be first to market with product and so forth, but you have to be able to have these professionals in the background that can make these risk assessments and weigh the revenue versus the cost of the organization. Is that skill set present right now?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned that security used to be no, now it's okay, let's see, and it's been more of a balance of balancing reward of a product and service design versus the security. So you can't have a closed up box, but you can also not have a very open box, and how do you balance that? I think there's a lot of available frameworks that are free and accessible, and enterprises looking to start their security posture or strengthen it. They have a lot of available resources and frameworks like NIST, CSF just released a new framework last month, which includes governance. And I think when you look at governance specifically, you also turn security from just the CISO's job to a shared responsibility. So you have to have input across the board, and defense is not just around a system. You don't bolt security on, you have to build it by design, whether it's a system or a process. So the way that you can build security inherently is doing it through layers, defense through layers, and having controls or protective measures at every step, and that includes educating employees. So the gap of our employees all educated, no matter what use case it is, it starts with a lot of campaigns, for example, phishing campaigns that help awareness across the board for noticing what's wrong and then reporting it. You also have a lot of organizations, there are cybersecurity alliances that help even within the cyber organization to upskill some of those skills, whether it's pen testing or vulnerability scanning.
Yeah. From a regional perspective, SY, what's the, do you have the skill sets within your region of the world to be able to support organizations from a cyber perspective?
So I think we're getting there. We need to do more, but I think one thing that is changing from our organization point of view and our industry point of view is I used to not talk to CSIO, CISO in important meetings or product strategy meetings. Now they are in the meeting, so it's a changing over time.
Yeah, and what I'd offer too is I think one of the things on the labor estimates, will we have enough cyber workforce to deal with this problem? It's usually a doom and gloom story, but one thing I think that hasn't been factored into that is the advent of artificial intelligence, and every OEM, Microsoft, Google, every major OEM is building AI into their security products and services. That's going to greatly enable us to probably not have to hire that massive workforce because there's so much automation and it's a force multiplier. So I think some of the story around the lack of a workforce, certainly there's a shortage, but I don't think anybody accounted for the technology coming online the way it has.
Yeah, well, okay, here's a great question for you. What happens if TikTok gets banned? How does that impact the role of the CISO?
Well, I think tactically, every CISO at any company of any size already has the tools to kind of take care of that, mobile device management and other things. It's been accounted for probably in policy. So tactically, it's not actually that difficult. I think it's the broader question of what does this do to our policies? How do we educate our workforce? How do we kind of make the workforce part of the solution, which we heard a little bit about earlier? I think that's the bigger impact.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds as if it really does come down to people at the end of the day. I mean, even something as simple as locking your workstation, right? Or leaving your ID on the bathroom counter or something like that.
Yeah, yes, there are, I think, over 3 million cyber vacancies globally, 500,000 of them in the US. But it isn't just about finding the cyber people. You have to create them, you have to upskill, reskill. But the education of the workforce is crucial. And honestly, I think it's not just on cyber awareness. I do think it's on AI awareness as well, because if you are not aware of what AI can actually do, you would not know that you're on the receiving end of an attempt to try and fake a fake voice attempt, or you wouldn't know if you didn't know that technology could even do some of the things that are happening. I'm subject to one right now. I have people at work receiving WhatsApp messages, apparently from me, asking them to do various things.
Yep.
Right? They know, but if they didn't know that that was possible, it's quite convincing.
We had that in the U.S. last year, where not just here, but Fortune 500 companies where CEOs were sending text on work phones to, and the phishing, the emails, and there's smishing and a whole bunch of other terms, but they look so real. And we're trained. I actually just had my cybersecurity training, so we're trained on the enterprise level, but for the average person, it's just not as discernible. I go through this with my mom all the time.
And there are countries who are investing in awareness programs for their entire nation, right? School kids, teachers, parents, because it starts there, and those kids will come into the workforce. Parents will come in, and work from home, of course, creates all these other issues. So the education on not just cyber awareness, but say the capabilities of AI and how it can be malicious, I think, is important as well.
Which is so interesting for cyber professionals. AI can do so much good and it can do so much bad, and being able to balance that out, it's almost like a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, it's a friend and foe.
Yeah, I think that the APT and the bad guys have it, but we have it as well, and so there is a little bit of a leveling there. And then I think it shifts the conversation, going back to your point in the boardroom around, well, what do you do? So if there's 0% chance you can stop 100% of the attacks, well, then you have to focus on resilience and recovery. And I think that's an emerging area where we need to put a lot more energy, because regardless of how well your employees are trained, you're going to suffer an attack. And so how do you recover? How resilient are you?
Yeah, it's absolutely not a question of if. It is absolutely when, and how you are able to respond to it is crucial.
Appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.